over a week since I have done this with Family Robinson videos. I had internet trouble, and then I ended up not feeling well, and then I had a lot of deadlines to do for school, so the days really added up. So we left off where, in chapter 2, I started chapter 2, and we left off where the author and his oldest, Fritz, they were exploring the island a little bit, and you remember they came across the monkeys, and Fritz was angry, and I think he wanted to try to kill one, and his father said no, and so anyway, they ended up getting some coconuts and started eating those, and they decided they didn't want the lobster that they were carrying along, so they gave it to the dog, whom they named Turk. So I'm going to continue on and finish reading chapter 2 today, and I already posted the chapter 2 resources. I will add to that, and then I will try to get to chapter 3 tomorrow and probably read all of it. It'll be just a lot of reading, and I'll post resources and probably not a lot of commentary. Try to get caught up here. So, alright, the homeward journey. I soon discovered that Fritz found the weight of his canes considerably more than he had expected. Remember, they found sugar cane. He shifted them from shoulder to shoulder, then for a while carried them under his arm, and finally stopped short with a sigh. I had no idea, he said, that a few reeds would be so heavy. Never mind, son, I said. Patience and courage. Do you not remember the story of Aesop and his breadbasket? How heavy he found it when he started, and how light at the end of his journey? Let us each take a fresh staff, and then fasten the bundle crosswise with your gun. This father, the author here, is very clever, and remember reading that he did a lot of travels and everything, and studied. He was a pastor and did a lot of traveling, so I find this amazing how very educated this author is about things. And made wonderful stories for his children. So let's continue on. So we did so, and once more stepped forward. Fritz presently noticed that I from time to time sucked at the end of my cane. Oh, come, said he, that's a capital plan of yours, father. I'll do that too. So saying, he began to suck most vigorously, but not a drop of the juice could he extract. How is this? He asked. How do you get the juice out, father? Think a little, I replied. You are quite as capable as I am of finding out the way, even if you do not know the real reason of your failure. Remember, here we are seeing another example of the father getting the children to think for themselves, to try to figure out problems for themselves, to engage their critical thinking. Oh, of course, said he. It's like trying to suck marrow from a marrow bone without making a hole at the other end. Quite right, I said. You form a vacuum in your mouth and the end of your tube and expect the air to force down the liquid from the other end, which it cannot possibly enter. Fritz was speedily perfect in the accomplishment of sucking sugar cane, discovering by experience the necessity for fresh cut at each joint or knot in the cane, through which the juice would not flow. He talked of the pleasure of initiating his brothers in the art, and of how Ernest would enjoy the coconut milk with which he had filled his flask. My dear boy, said I, you need not have added that to your load. The chances are it is vinegar by the time we get home. In the heat of the sun, it will ferment soon after being drawn from the nut. Gross. Vinegar? Oh, that would be a horrid bore. I must look directly and see how it is getting on, cried Fritz, hastily swinging the flask from his shoulder and tugging out the cork. With a loud pop, the contents came forth, foaming like champagne. There now, said I, laughing as he tasted this new luxury. You will have to exercise moderation again, friend Fritz. I dare say it is delicious, but it will go to your head if you venture deep into your flask. My dear father, you cannot think how good it is. Do take some. Vinegar indeed. This is like excellent wine. We were both invigorated by this unexpected draught, and went on so merrily after it that the distance to the place where we had left our gourd dishes seemed less than we expected. We found them quite dry and very light and easy to carry. Just as we had passed through the grove in which we had breakfasted, Turk suddenly darted away from us and sprang furiously among a troop of monkeys, which were gambolling playfully on the turf at a little distance from the trees. They were taken by surprise completely, and the dog, now really ravenous from hunger, had seized and was fiercely tearing one to pieces before we could approach the spot. His luckless victim was the mother of a tiny little monkey, which, being on her back when the dog flew at her, hindered her flight. The little creature attempted to hide among the grass, and in trembling fear watched its mother. On perceiving Turk's bloodthirsty design, Fritz had eagerly rushed to the rescue, flinging away all he was carrying and losing his hat in his haste. All to no purpose as far as the poor mother ape was concerned, and a laughable scene ensued, for no sooner did the young monkey catch sight of him than at one bound it was on his shoulders, and holding fast by his thick curly hair, firmly kept its seat in spite of all he could do to dislodge it. He screamed and plunged about as he endeavored to shake or pull off the creature, but all in vain. It only clung the closer to his neck, making the most absurd grimaces. I'm going to stop for a second here and note that in it does talk about this monkey being an ape, and monkeys actually are not classified as apes. It's a common error. You'll hear a lot of people call monkeys apes. Monkeys are primates, and the apes, they include the humans, and then the other apes you have the chimpanzees, gorillas, gibbons, and orangutans. And monkeys are something completely different. Monkeys and lemurs are not apes. I laughed so much at this ridiculous scene that I could scarcely assist my terrified boy out of his awkward predicament. At last, by coaxing the monkey, offering it a little bit of biscuit, and gradually disentangling its small sinewy paws from the curls it grasped so tightly, I managed to relieve poor Fritz, who then looked with interest at the baby ape, no bigger than a kitten, as it lay in my arms. "What a jolly little fellow it is!" exclaimed he. "Do let me try to rear it, father. I dare say coconut milk will do until we can bring the cow and goats from the wreck. If he lives, he might be useful to us. I believe monkeys instinctively know what fruits are wholesome and what are poisonous." "Well," said I, "let the little orphan be yours. You bravely and kindly exerted yourself to save the mother's life. Now you must train her child carefully, for unless you do so, its natural instinct will prove mischievous instead of useful to us." Turk was meanwhile devouring with such great satisfaction the little animal's unfortunate mother. I could not grudge at him, and continued hunger might have made him dangerous to ourselves. We did not think it necessary to wait until he had dined, so we prepared to resume our march. The tiny ape seated itself in the coolest way imaginable on Fritz's shoulder. I helped to carry his canes, and we were on some distance before Turk overtook us, looking uncommonly well pleased and licking his chops as though recalling the memory of his feast. He took no notice of the monkey, but it was very uneasy at sight of him, and scrambled down into Fritz's arms, which was so inconvenient to him that he devised a plan to relieve himself of his burden. Calling Turk and seriously enjoining obedience, he seated the monkey on his back, securing it there with a cord, and then putting a second string around the dog's neck, that he might lead him. He put a loop of the knot into the comical rider's hand, saying gravely, "Having slain the parent, Mr. Turk, you will please to carry the son." At first this arrangement mightily displeased them both, but by and by they yielded to it quietly, the monkey especially amused by riding along with the air of a person perfectly at ease. "We look just like a couple of mountebanks on their way to a fair with animals to exhibit," said I. "What an outcry the children will make when we appear." Juno was the first to be aware of our approach, and gave notice of it by loud barking, to which Turk replied with such hearty good will that his little rider, terrified at the noise his steed was making, slipped from under the cord and fled to his refuge on Fritz's shoulder, where he regained his composure and settled himself comfortably. Turk, who by this time knew where he was, finding himself free, dashed forward to rejoin his friends and announce our coming. One after another our dear ones came running to the opposite bank, testifying in various ways their delight at our return, and hastening up on their side of the river, as we on ours, to the ford at which we had crossed in the morning. We were quickly on the other side, and full of joy and affection, our happy party was once more united. This boy, suddenly perceiving the little animal which was clinging close to their brother, in alarm at the tumult of voices, shouted in ecstasy, "A monkey! A monkey! Oh, how splendid! Where did Fritz find him? What may we give him to eat? Oh, what a bundle of sticks! Look at those curious great nuts father has got!" We could neither check this confused torrent of questions nor get in a word in answer to them. At length, when the excitement subsided a little, I was able to say a few words with a chance of being listened to. I am truly thankful to see you all safe and well, and thank God our expedition has been very satisfactory, except that we have entirely failed to discover any trace of our shipmates. If it be the will of God, said my wife, to leave us alone on this solitary place, let us be content, and rejoice that we are all together in safety. Now I want to hear all your adventures, and let us relieve you of your burdens, added she, taking my game bag. Jack shouldered my gun, Ernest took the coconuts, and little Franz carried the gourds. Fritz distributed the sugar canes among his brothers, and handing Ernest his gun, replaced the monkey on Turk's back. Ernest soon found the burden with which Fritz had laden him too heavy for his taste. His mother, perceiving this, offered to relieve him of part of the load. He gave up willingly the coconuts, but no sooner had he done so than his elder brother exclaimed, "Hullo, Ernest! You surely do not know what you are parting with. Did you really intend to hand over those good coconuts without so much as tasting them?" "What? Oh, are they really coconuts?" cried Ernest. "Oh, do let me take them again, Mother. Do let me look at them." "No, thank you," replied my wife with a smile. "I have no wish to see you again overburdened." "Oh, but I have only to throw away these sticks, which are of no use. Then I can easily carry them." "Worse and worse," said Fritz. "I have particular regard for those heavy, useless sticks. Did you ever hear of sugar canes?" The words were scarcely out of his mouth when Ernest began to suck vigorously at the end of the cane, with no better result, however, than Fritz had obtained as we were on the march. "Here," said Fritz, "let me show you the trick of it." And he speedily set all the youngsters to work extracting the luscious juice. My wife, as a prudent housekeeper, was no less delighted than the children with this discovery. The sight of the dishes also pleased her greatly, for she longed to see us eat once more like civilized beings. We went to the kitchen, and there found preparations for a truly sumptuous meal. 2 forked sticks were planted in the ground on either side of the fire. On these rested a rod from which hung several tempting-looking fish. Opposite them hung a goose from a similar contrivance, slowly roasting while the gravy dropped into a large shell placed beneath it. In the center sat the great pot, from which issued the smell of a most delicious soup. To crown this splendid array stood an open hogshead full of Dutch cheeses. All this was very pleasant to 2 hungry travelers, but I was about to beg my wife to spare the poultry until our stock should have increased, when she, perceiving my thought, quickly relieved my anxiety. "This is not one of our geese," she said, "but a wild bird Ernest killed." "Yes," said Ernest, "it is a penguin, I think. It let me get quite close, so I knocked it on the head with a stick. Here are its head and feet, which I preserved to show you. The bill is, you see, narrow and curved downward, and the feet are webbed. It had funny little bits of useless wings, and its eyes looked so solemnly and sedately at me that I almost was ashamed to kill it. Do you think it must have been a penguin?" I would be sad. I had little doubt on the matter, my boy, and I was about to make a few remarks on the habits of this bird, when my wife interrupted me and begged us to come to dinner and continue our natural history conversation at some future time. We then sat down before the appetizing meal prepared for us, our gourds coming for the first time into use, and having done it full justice, produced the coconuts by way of dessert. "Here is better food for your little friend," said I to Fritz, who had been vainly endeavoring to persuade the monkey to taste dainty morsels of the food we've been eating. "The poor little animal has been accustomed to nothing but its mother's milk. Fetch me a saw, one of you." I then, after extracting the milk of the nuts from their natural hosts, carefully cut the shells in half, thus providing several more useful basins. The monkey was perfectly satisfied with the milk, and eagerly sucked at the corner of a handkerchief dipped in it. The sun was now rapidly sinking behind the horizon, and the poultry, retiring for the night, warned us that we must follow their example. Having offered up our prayers, we lay down on our beds, the monkey crouched down between Jack and Fritz, and we were all soon fast asleep. We did not, however, long enjoy this repose. A loud barking from our dogs, who were on guard outside the tent, awakened us, and the fluttering and cackling of our poultry warned us that a foe was approaching. Fritz and I sprang up, and seizing our guns, rushed out. There we found a desperate combat going on. Our gallant dogs, surrounded by a dozen or more large jackals, were fighting bravely. 4 of their opponents lay dead, but the others were in no way deterred by the fate of their comrades. Fritz and I, however, sent bullets through the heads of a couple more, and the rest galloped off. Can you imagine jackals galloping? That sounds very loud. Turk and Juno did not intend that they should escape so cheaply. In pursuing them, they caught, killed, and devoured another of the animals, regardless of their near relationship. Fritz wished to save one of the jackals that he might be able to show it off to his brothers in the morning. Or to show it to his brothers in the morning. Dragging, therefore, the one they had shot near the tent, he concealed it, and we once more returned to our beds. Here are a couple pictures. This is illustrations of the dog and the jackals, and then we have this picture. So let's see what's coming next. Okay, that's a picture of what's coming next. We revisit the wreck. Soundly and peacefully we slept until cockcrow next morning, when my wife and I awoke and began to discuss the business of the day. It seems absolutely necessary, my dear wife began, to return at once to the wreck while it is yet calm, that we might save the poor animals left there, and bring on shore many articles of infinite value to us, which if we do not now recover, we may finally lose entirely. On the other hand, I feel there is an immense deal to be done on the shore, and that I ought not to leave you in such an insecure shelter as this tent. Return to the wreck by all means, replied my wife cheerfully. Come, let us wake the children and set to work without delay. They were soon roused, and Fritz, overcoming his drowsiness before the others, ran out for his jackal. It was cold and stiff from the night air, and he placed it on its legs before the tent in a most lifelike attitude, and stood by to watch the effect upon the family. The dogs were the first to perceive their enemy, and growling, seemed inclined to dispose of the animal as they had disposed of his brethren in the night, but Fritz called them off. The noise the dogs made, however, had the effect of bringing out the younger children, and many were at the exclamations they made at the sight of the strange animal. "A yellow dog!" cried Franz. "A wolf!" exclaimed Jack. Those kids must sleep pretty well if they didn't get up in the night. "It is a striped fox," said Ernest. "Hullo!" said Fritz. "The greatest men may make mistakes. Our professor does not know a jackal when he sees one." "But really," continued Ernest, examining the animal, "I think it is a fox." Very well, retorted Fritz. "No doubt you know better than your father. He thinks it is a jackal." "Come, boys," said I, "no more of this quarreling. You are none of you very far wrong, for the jackal partakes of the nature of all three, dog, wolf, and fox." The monkey had come out on Jack's shoulder, but no sooner did it catch sight of the jackal than it fled precipitately back into the tent and hid itself in a heap of moss until nothing was visible but the tip of its little nose. Jack soothed and comforted the frightened little animal, and I then summoned them all to prayers, soon after which we began our breakfast. So severely had we dealt with our supper the previous night that we had little to eat but the biscuits, which were so dry and hard that, hungry as we could not swallow much. Fritz and I took some cheese to help them down, while my wife and younger son soaked theirs in water. Ernest roamed down to shore and looked about for shellfish. Presently he returned with a few whelks. "Ah," said he, "if we had but some butter." "My boy," I replied, "your perpetual if quite annoys me. Why do you not sit down and eat cheese like the rest of us?" "Not while I can get butter," he said. "See here, father," and he pointed to a large cask. "The barrel contains butter of some sort or another, for it is oozing out at the end." "Really, Ernest," I said, "we are indebted to you. Oh, open the cask." So saying, I took a knife and carefully cut a small hole so that I could extract the butter without exposing the mass of it to the effects of the air and heat. Filling a coconut shell, we once more sat down and, toasting our biscuits before the fire, spread them with the good Dutch butter. We found this vastly better than the dry biscuits, and while we were thus employed, I noticed that the two dogs were lying unusually quiet by my side. I at first attributed this drowsiness to their large meal during the night, but I soon discovered that it arose from a different cause. The faithful animals had not escaped unhurt from their late combat, but had received several deep and painful wounds, especially about the neck. The dogs began to lick each other on the places which they could not reach with their own tongues. My wife carefully dressed the wounds with butter, from which she had extracted the salt by washing. Sudden thought now struck Ernest, and he wisely remarked that if we were to make spiked collars for the dogs, they would in future escape such dangerous wounds. "Oh, yes," exclaimed Jack, "and I will make them. May I not, father?" "Try by all means, Jack," said I, "and persuade your mother to assist you. And now, Fritz," I continued, "we must be starting, for you and I are to make a trip to the wreck." I begged the party who were to remain on shore, to keep together as much as possible, and having arranged a set of signals with my wife that we might exchange communications, asked a blessing on our enterprise. I erected a signal post, and while Fritz was making preparations for our departure, hoisted a strip of sailcloth as a flag. This flag was to remain hoisted so long as all was well on shore, but should our return be desired, 3 shots were to be fired and the flag lowered. All was now ready, and warning my wife that we might find it necessary to remain all night on the vessel, we tenderly bade adieu and embarked. Except our guns and ammunition, we were taking nothing, that we might leave as much space as possible for the stowage of a large cargo. Fritz, however, had resolved to bring his little monkey, that he might obtain milk for it as soon as possible. We had not gotten far, from the shore when I perceived that a current from the river set me directly for the vessel, and though my nautical knowledge was not great, I succeeded in steering the boat into the favorable stream, which carried us nearly 3/4 of our passage with little or no trouble to ourselves. Then, by dint of hard pulling, we accomplished the whole distance and entered through the breach, gladly made fast our boat, and stepped on board. Our first care was to see the animals, who greeted us with joy, lowing, bellowing, and bleating as we approached. Not that the poor beasts were hungry, for they were all still well supplied with food, but they were apparently pleased by the mere sight of human beings. Fritz then placed his monkey by one of the goats, and the little animal immediately sucked the milk with evident relish, chattering and grinning all the while. The monkey provided for, we refreshed ourselves with some wine and biscuits. "Now," said I, "we have plenty to do. Where shall we begin?" "Let us fix a mast and a sail to our boat," answered Fritz, "for the current which brought us out will not take us back, whereas the fresh breeze we met would help us immensely had we but a sail." "Capital thought," I replied. Let us set to work at once." I chose a stout spar to serve as a mast, and having made a hole in a plank nailed across one of the tubs, we, with the help of a rope and a couple of blocks, stepped it and secured it with stays. We then discovered a lug sail, which had belonged to one of the ship's boats. This we hoisted, and our craft was ready to sail. Fritz begged me to decorate the masthead with a red streamer, to give our vessel a more finished appearance. Smiling at this childish but natural vanity, I complied with his request. I then contrived a rudder, that I might be able to steer the boat, for though I knew that an oar would serve the purpose, it was cumbrous and inconvenient. While I was thus employed, Fritz examined the shore with his glass, and soon announced that the flag was flying and all was well. So much time had now slipped away that we found that we could not return that night, as I had wished. We signaled our intention of remaining on board, and then spent the rest of our time in taking out the stones we had placed in the boat for ballast, and stowed in their place heavy articles of value to us. The ship had sailed for the purpose of supplying a young colony. She had therefore on board every conceivable article we could desire in our present situation. Our only difficulty, indeed, was to make a wise selection. A large quantity of powder and shot we first secured, and as Fritz considered that we could not have too many weapons, we added 3 excellent guns and a whole armful of swords, daggers, and knives. Remembering that knives and forks were necessary, we laid in a large stock of them and kitchen utensils of all sorts. Exploring the captain's cabin, we discovered a service of silver plate and a cellaret of good old wine. We then went over the stores and supplied ourselves with potted meats, portable soups, Westphalian hams, sausages, a bag of maize and wheat, and a quantity of other seeds and vegetables. I then added a barrel of sulphur for matches, and as much cordage as I could find. All this, with nails, tools, and agricultural implements, completed our cargo, and sank our boat so low that I should have been obliged to lighten her had not the sea been calm. Night drew on, and a large fire, lighted by those on shore, showed us that all was well. We replied by hoisting 4 ship's lanterns, and 2 shots announced to us that our signal was perceived. Then, with a heartfelt prayer for the safety of our dear ones on shore, we retired to our boat, and Fritz, at all events, was soon sound asleep. For a while I could not sleep. The thought of my wife and children, alone and unprotected, save by the great dogs, disturbed my rest. The night at length passed away. At daybreak, Fritz and I rose and went on deck. I brought the telescope to bear upon the shore, and with pleasure saw the flag still waving in the morning breeze. While I kept the glass directed to the land, I saw the door of the tent open and my wife appear and look steadfastly toward us. I at once hoisted a white flag, and in reply the flag on shore was thrice dipped. Oh, what a weight seemed lifted from my heart as I saw the signal. Fritz, I said, I am not now in such haste to get back, and begin to feel compassion for all these poor beasts. I wish we could devise some means for getting them on shore. We might make a raft, suggested Fritz, and take off one or two at a time. True, I replied. It's easy enough to say make a raft, but to do it is quite another thing. Well, said Fritz, I can think of nothing else, unless indeed we make them such swimming belts as you made for the children. Really, my boy, that idea is worth having. I'm not joking, indeed, I continued as I saw him smile. We may get every one of the animals ashore in that way. So saying, I caught a fine sheet, proceeded to put our plan into execution. I first fastened a broad piece of linen round its belly, and to this attached some corks and empty tins. Then, with Fritz's help, I flung the animal to the sea. It sank, but a moment afterward rose and floated famously. Hurrah! Exclaimed Fritz. We will treat them all like that. We then rapidly caught the other animals and provided them one after the other with a similar contrivance. The cow and ass gave us more trouble than did the others. As for them, we required something more buoyant than the mere cork. We at last found some empty casks and fastened two to each animal by thongs passed under its belly. This done, the whole herd were ready to start, and we brought the ass to one of the ports to be the first to be launched. After some maneuvering, we got him in a convenient position, and then a sudden heave sent him plunging into the sea. He sank, and then, buoyed up by the cask, emerged head and back from the water. The cow, sheep, and goats followed him one after the other, and then the sow alone remained. She seemed, however, determined not to leave the ship. She kicked, struggled, and squealed so violently that I really thought we should be obliged to abandon her. Oh, poor pig. At length, after just much trouble, we succeeded in sending her out of the port after the others, and when once in the water, such was the old lady's energy that she quickly distanced them who was the first to reach the shore. The pig must have really hated water. We had fastened to the horns or neck of each animal a cord with a float attached to the end, and now embarking, we gathered up these floats, set sail, and steered for shore, drawing our herd after us. Delighted with the successful accomplishment of our task, we got out some biscuits and enjoyed a midday meal. Then, while Fritz amused himself with his monkey, I took up my glass and tried to make out how our dear ones on shore were employing themselves. As I was thus engaged, a sudden shout from Fritz surprised me. I glanced up. There stood Fritz with his gun to his shoulder, pointing at a huge shark. The monster was making for one of the finest sheep, and he turned on his side to seize his prey. As the white of his belly appeared, Fritz fired. The shot took effect, and our enemy disappeared, leaving a trace of blood on the calm water. Well done, Fritz, I cried. You will become a crack shot one of these days. But I trust you will not often have such dangerous game to shoot. Fritz's eyes sparkled at his success and my praise, and reloading his gun, carefully watched the water. But the shark did not again appear, and borne onward by the breeze, we quickly neared the shore. Steering the boat to a convenient landing place, I cast off the ropes which secured the animals and let them get ashore as best they might. There was no sign of my wife or children when we stepped on land, but a few moments afterward they appeared, and with a shout of joy ran toward us. We were thankful to be once more united, and after asking and replying to a few preliminary questions, proceeded to release our herd from their swimming belts, which, though so useful in the water, were exceedingly inconvenient on shore. My wife was astonished at the apparatus. "How clever you are," said she. "I am not the inventor," I replied. "The honor is due to Fritz. He not only thought of this plan for bringing off the animals, but saved one at least of them from a most fearful death." And I then told them how bravely he had encountered the shark. There's a little illustration of the shark going after the sheep. Fritz, Ernest, and I began the work of unloading our craft, while Jack, seeing that the poor donkey was still encumbered with the swimming belt, tried to free him from it. But the donkey would not stand quiet, and the child's fingers were not strong enough to loosen the cordage. Finally, therefore, he scrambled upon the animal's back, and urging him on with hand and foot, trotted toward us. "Come, my boy," I said, "no one must be idle here, even for a moment. You'll have riding practice enough hereafter. Dismount and come and help us." Jack was soon on his feet. "But I have not been idle all day," he said. "Look here." He pointed to a belt round his waist. It was a broad belt of yellow hair in which he had stuck a couple of pistols and a knife. "And see," he added, "what I've made for the dogs. Here, Juno! Turk!" The dogs came bounding up at his call, and I saw that they were each supplied with a collar of the same skin, in which were fastened nails which bristled round their necks in a most formidable manner. "Capital, capital, young man," said I, "but where did you get your materials, and who helped you?" I guess that would protect the dogs. I think I would be worried about getting stuck with the nails, though, if you try to go pet the dogs. And you know how dogs like to jump around and all. So there's a downside to everything. Okay. "Capital, capital, young man," said I, "but where did you get your materials, and who helped you?" "Except in cutting the skin," said my wife, "he had no assistance. And as for the materials, Fritz's jackal supplied us with the skin, and the needles and thread came out of my wonderful bag." Fritz evidently did not approve of the use to which his jackal's hide had been devoted, and holding his nose, begged his little brother to keep at a distance. "Really, Jack," he said, "you should have cured the hide before you used it. The smell is disgusting. Don't come near me." "It's not the hide that smells at all," retorted Jack. "It is you nasty jackal itself, which you left in the sun." "Now, boy," said I, "no quarreling here. Do you, Jack, help your brother to drag the carcass to the sea, and if your belt smells after that, you must take it off and dry it better." Jackal was dragged off, and we then finished our work of unloading our boat. When this was accomplished, we started for our tent, and finding no preparation for supper, I said, "Fritz, let us have a Westphalian ham." "Ernest," said my wife, smiling, "let us see if we cannot conjure up some eggs." Fritz got out a splendid ham and carried it to his mother triumphantly, while Ernest set before me a dozen white balls with parchment-like coverings. "Turtles' eggs," said I. "Well done, Ernest. Where did you get them?" "That," replied my wife, "shall be told in due course when we relate our adventures. Now we'll see what they will do toward making a supper for you. With these and your ham, I do not think we shall starve." Leaving my wife to prepare supper, we returned to the shore and brought up what of the cargo we had left there. Then, having collected our herd of animals, we returned to the tent. The meal which awaited us was as unlike the first supper we had there enjoyed as possible. My wife had improvised a table of a board laid on 2 casks. On this was spread a white damask tablecloth, on which were placed knives, forks, spoons, and plates for each person. A tureen of good soup first appeared, followed by a capital omelette, then slices of the ham, and finally some Dutch cheese, butter, and biscuits, with a bottle of the captain's canary wine, completed the repast. While we thus regaled ourselves, I related to my wife our adventures, and then begged she would remember her promise and tell me all what had happened in my absence. I don't know about you all, but I do hope that they find some vegetables soon. They're going to be constipated. But anyway, that is it for Chapter 2, and I will try to get to Chapter 3 tomorrow, and I will go review the resources that I posted for Chapter 2 and add anything that I think would be interesting and helpful. I'll try to get Chapter 3 up tomorrow, and I hope you all have a nice day. Bye.